Everyone, welcome to IOSH Oman 4th branch meeting. The theme for today's event is HSE practitioners and future of work. To start with, just as a housekeeping rule, all the mics will be muted. You can turn your camera on or you can put the cameras off. Turn your view to the speaker view. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type your questions in the chat box, which we'll be taking at the end of the session. During this discussion, only one speaker at a time so that we can overcome the challenges of virtual meetings and we can hear the speaker properly. As per IOSH protocol, as far as security concerned, the meeting will be logged at 7:50. But still, I'll ask Catherine to support in case if somebody gets switch off or get disconnected due to the network issue and want to rejoin. So we'll keep watch on that. So with this, welcome to IOSH Oman branch meeting. I welcome all the branch members, the new members, the attendees from the different part of the world, all the potential IOSH members. We as a IOSH Oman, we always strive to support our members and non-members in the region. And for today's meeting, our agenda will be, I'll give you the quick updates on the IOSH branch, IOSH Oman branch. Then we will have the main session on HSE practitioner and future of work, safety in the context of Industry 4.0. At the end, we'll have the question and answers, and then we'll move for the future events discussion and any other business. So the IOSH Oman branch is working in line with the purpose of IOSH branches, where we champion for the occupational health and safety professionals. We do the collaborations with the interested stakeholders, and we help the members for their professional development. The IOSH Oman branch also works with the same IOSH 6 priorities, where we focus on more on non-health related fatalities, occupational cancer, well-being, rehabilitation to the work, musculoskeletal disorders, and sustainability and human capital. As a IOSH Work 2022 strategy, we work with enhance, collaborate, and influence objective. And we also help members for their personality development, professional development by using the IOSH core competency framework, which is based on technical, behavioral, and core competencies. IOSH Oman, we have 14 committee members. I myself, the Nilesh Sogani, chairing the IOSH Oman branch. And with me, I have an executive committee and other members joining today to welcome all of you. As a IOSH Oman, we have 239 active members in the region. And we are giving the opportunities to the members for the networking with the occupational health and safety professionals, authorities, regulators, and industry sectors. We are 14 core committee members who are always striving to support all the OSS professionals in the region. We are providing free seminars, branch events, CPD tools, and other resources for the business. And we have an impactful presence in IOSH in Oman, especially we have been recognized by the industry. Our last event was very power-packed event with more than 300 attendees. We are influencing and supporting the government and other businesses in the region. And we are a key player for providing platform on the health and safety issues. As the IOSH Oman branch, we are 239 members with 103 graduate members and 29 chartered members. We are moving towards attracting more young professionals. And over last year, we were able to secure 32 student members. If you see in terms of demographic, we have 19 female members and 215 male members. And we have a more young population in the health and safety profession. So you can see most of our members are between the age of 20 to 49. So as a Oman branch, we also work with the principle of enhance, collaborate, and influence. And our main objective is to ensure that we support our members. We provide people awareness about the branch events. We reach to the industries and operators and SMEs in terms of enhancing. We have a collaboration with the Ministry of and the MOU with the OPAL, the ICM, and the different other governing bodies. We are liaising with the authorities, and we are providing the platform for the brainstorming on the different occupational health and safety issues in the region. We are also reaching to the schools, colleges, and unorganized sector for HSE awareness. So today, we have selected the session on HSE practitioners and future of work, where we'll be talking more about the future of health and safety professionals, how the industry 4.0 is taking place, and what we as a health and safety professionals need to change in terms of seeing the changes ahead. Especially last 1.5 years, there was a drastic change because of the pandemic, and with the enhancement of the technology, the future and the face of the occupational health and safety professionals is also changing. So to talk more on this, I have Mr. JC Sekhar, co-founder and CEO from Equigen Technology Singapore. JC is having a vast experience of more than 3 decades. He is morely involved in the different demographics in terms of design, manufacturing, quality assurance, information technology, assessment, and he is very much keen on the learning and development business. He's a renowned speaker as a IOSH and in the region. He has spoken in the different international and global events. He has moderated a lot of panel discussions. In his key achievement, he was invited as a presenter for the UNIDO in 2019, Vienna, Austria, where he was presenting in the industrial safety in the context of Industry 4.0. We have been the panel member of GMIS UNIDO, Lloyd 39 Register, and the foundation which promote safety in the Industry 4.0. Along with JC, let me welcome Kamil Al-Lawati. He's a renowned face in Oman. He is an environment and social discipline specialist working with the British Petroleum Oman, with the vast experience of 29 years in the oil and gas industry. Prior to oil and gas industry, he was working with the Ministry of Electricity and Water. He's worked with the Shell Oman Marketing, and currently he's working with the BP Oman. He's holding MBA from UK, and he's a grade IOSH. He's an active member of IOSH Oman Committee. He's also on the different advisory panel, and some of these are ICM College Advisory Panel, OPAL HSE Managers Committee. So with this, let me welcome JC to initiate his talks and join with Kamil Al-Lawati. So JC, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nilesh, and thank you for the invitation, and thanks to the people from the Oman branch for having me. So it's a real pleasure to be here. Let me just start sharing my screen, and if you can just confirm that. Catherine, I think a few people seem to be having problems with, I think somebody called Aslam is having a problem with the audio. If you can please support him. I think some people seem to be having a problem with the audio. So if you don't mind, I can just say that the audio is fine for most of you. If there's anybody having a problem, obviously you can't hear me, so I can't say raise your hand, but please put it in the chat window. Right. So thanks again for having me. And I think it's a real pleasure to be talking. It's rather late here in Singapore, but I think this is a very interesting subject and something I'm very passionate about. So I'm looking forward to interacting with you. I must mention that what I'm going to be doing today is really a little bit of crystal ball gazing. So I don't want to claim that I'm an expert in anything. So I'm only doing a bit of crystal ball glazing. And when I do that, I must put a disclaimer saying that this is purely for educational purposes. I may be talking something which I believe is the way things will shape up. That may or may not happen. So take that with a pinch of salt and don't let this be replacing the need for independent professionals to give a judgment. So I want to set that context out. And I also want to know that we're going to be talking about Industry 4.0. That's the important thing. And it's nice to see a lot of familiar faces and familiar names here. So I want to get a quick sense of where are you from? I mean, it's nice to know where you're from. So let's also keep this a bit interactive. So I'm going to kind of toggle a little bit. If you don't mind, if you can very quickly scan this QR code on your handphone, or you just go into your browser and type slido.com and put in that code number. Can you just let me know where you're from? And let's all know where we are from. So obviously I'm from Singapore, sorry. So where are you joining today's presentation from? Go ahead. I want to get you a little active, so let's find out where the people are from. We have 48 people here. Newcastle, right? Singapore, great. Hello, Singapore. Count me in there. Qatar, Hong Kong. By the way, it is really an honor to have Vincent. I'm sure this Hong Kong one is Vincent. Vincent's a former president of IOSH. So it's really an honor to have Vincent, and Vincent's putting me under pressure now. Okay, come on. Oman and Singapore and Kuwait seem to have more people than Oman. Nilesh, your branch is not very active. Okay, that's great. So Oman's taken over. You heard me. Right, so we have a nice mix all the way from the Far East, from Hong Kong to Singapore to the Middle East, obviously, and also from the UK and Ireland and multiple places. So that's nice to have you all here. And the topic for today's discussion really is going to be, so it's predominantly Oman, and I think we have folks from India as well. So that's nice to know. So we're going to be talking about Industry 4.0, but before I get started, we just have 14 people. I would encourage you to be more active in your response. I know that we have participants from the Caribbean. I don't see Caribbean here, so I hope you can put in your response. Just to repeat, just go into slido.com. We'll be having a couple of sessions where I need your participation, so I hope you can go in there and enter the information. Just go to slido.com and key in that passcode, or just scan the QR code from your phone and you should be able to get started. Okay, New Delhi, that's again India. Okay, I think this is a good representation. So we have the continent covered. I only wish we had somebody from Singapore's become bigger. That's nice. Okay, right. I also want to know, thanks everybody. We are going to be talking about Industry 4.0, but I wanted to kind of get a sense of what's your level of awareness of Industry 4.0? Are you somebody who's an expert in Industry 4.0, or is this something that you are keen to know more about, or you don't know much about the details? Okay, just give us some sense. Okay, 12, 14. So nobody wants to claim expertise, but I think I'm getting a general sense that people have an idea about what Industry 4.0 is, but you want to definitely know more about it, which is good. Okay, that's why we are here, right? Okay, so what is Industry 4.0? So that's the question. We've all heard about the industrial revolutions. These are terms which actually came from predominantly the German. The first industrial revolution was way back in the 17th century, in the 18th century, where it was predominantly about mechanization. So it was about using steam power and the weaving room and other new technologies. And then that moved on with Ford, and with Henry Ford's Industry 2.0 was all about mass production, the assembly line, and the use of electrical energy. Then we moved on to automation. A lot of what we've probably grown up with is automation, computers, and electronics. And today we are in this era of Industry 4.0, which is, the key word there is cyber-physical systems, which is really the Internet of Things, which is made by the Internet of Things, as well as networks and connectivity and all that stuff. So we are in this era of Industry 4.0, which is really, the key word there is cyber-physical systems, which means there is a little bit of connectivity, and there are also physical things that happen as a result of that. So what are some of the building blocks, so to say, of Industry 4.0? Let's look at that for a second. Or maybe before that, let's take a look at what the definition is. Again, this is an official definition of what a cyber-physical system is. Don't get bogged down with those words. I think it's a little complex, as probably a science foundation would come up with. But I think the key word really is to understand that it is about the intertwining of physical and software components. It's not about software in isolation and mechanical activities in isolation, or other physical activities in isolation. It's really about the interweaving of physical and software components, so that you're able to kind of get something which is changing with context. In other words, there is a responsiveness that happens because of this cyber and cyber and physical alignment or cyber and physical combination. So that's what a cyber physical system is all about. In practical terms, what it really means is it is about using some of these technologies. It's really about the coming together of technologies like cloud, mobile, robotics, 3D printing, machine to machine, big data, Internet of Things. Internet of Things is basically the connectivity of multiple devices, RFID technologies, and cognitive computing, which is really, the use of algorithms and other things to drive activities. So we are talking really of a system where all of these building blocks are coming together to facilitate the cyber physical system. So a classic or a very simple example of this would be a wearable. A wearable is also something which is a part of the industry 4.0 because it is a cyber and physical thing. It's measuring maybe a heartbeat or a pulse rate or something like that. It's probably transmitting that through a digital means to some other technology, or maybe you have that RFID which scans your presence in a particular facility. It tracks your things, or it could be even an advanced robotics where you're remotely managing an instrument or an equipment and controlling it. Basically, there are a lot of building blocks, and the whole idea is that through all of these building blocks, you're trying to create that autonomous decision making of cyber physical systems through machine learning and use of cloud technology, which basically means you have machine learning, which basically means you're taking a lot of your activities which are being done in the real world, in the physical world, and you're trying to teach technology to learn how that is done. You're using the power of the cloud, and you're trying to make sure that the decision making of the cyber physical system happens autonomously, which means you don't really need a human intervention at that point of time. So these are some of the fundamental building blocks of a cyber physical system, which is really the technology that drives Industry 4.0. Right, I want to kind of also let you know that this is going to be enhanced dramatically in the next few years, because if you look at computing, there is going to be a vast quantum of cloud computing that happens. The quantum computing is something that's big, and that's really a lot of it is under research. So quantum computing is going to drive the proliferation of a lot of the Industry 4.0 technologies, whether it be 5G or whether it be the latency with which you can kind of get the response from systems. All of this is going to happen in a big way in the next few years. So we are in the cusp of, I would say, really some, let's put it as quantum computing. So why does this matter for safety industry and for HSE professionals? So for this, I want to again transition back and pose a little bit of a quiz question in terms of what do we even mean by safety? And I want to bring that back into the context of Industry 4.0 momentarily. But before that, I want to ask you, what's the definition? What would you say is the definition of safety from your perspective? Would it be fair to say it's the absence of incidents? Again, for those of you who joined in late, just go into slido.com on your browser, either on your phone or your mobile, and then key in and say that what's your, put in the passcode, or go ahead and just scan that QR code. We're kind of even on this at this point of time. So I'll give you a few more seconds. Probably I'll wait for that number, that count on top to go to at least 20, because I think let's get at least a 40% participation rate. So we're still at 14. Okay, I think shoes have it at this point of time. It's a 50-50 right now. Okay, let's posit this. So the mood is, some people think safety is the absence of incidents, and some people think it's not. So the question is, what is our traditional view of safety? When we talk about safety, we do actually look at safety from a perspective of a lot of, okay, I think the number is more people think it's true, but let's get back. The traditional view of safety really is, safety is all about, the indicators like what you have here, which is about the incident rates or an accident rate or a near miss or absenteeism, audit rates. So there are multiple metrics that if you have, you may call some of them leading indicators, some of them lagging indicators, but you're really talking about predominantly looking at the absence of incidents, injuries, and fatality. Or at least that's what a majority of you think. And that's probably what I would say in the industry, that's the traditional view, is that we can measure safety performance by looking at all of these metrics, which are which are which we measure. But is that right? And I'll come to that in a moment. But before that, I want to also bring in Kamil here, because Kamil's from Oman, and I want him to speak about his perspective on this topic in terms of the injury rates and where are we heading in this direction. So Kamil, if you don't mind, if you can just step in and start. I'm going to put your slides on.
Yeah, thanks, Shekhar, for that. The other challenge which we are facing in the industry that maybe not Oman, but some organization, because the statistics in Oman, they are not really available and very goodly, nicely collected as other parts of the world, especially the Western world. But what we see that there is a plateau in the performance here. And we see that despite what controls we are putting and adding and some of the technology things we are entering, but we still the same serious incidents or injuries or fatalities are plateauing. And here you can see on the left side that the UK fatal serious injuries, and you can see that there is a plateau here. And this is the one available from US workplace here. And being myself in oil and gas industry, we see that in our organization that the things are plateauing, and whatever you do, you are not bringing the numbers down. That also asks the question whether our understanding for the safety is the definition, the historical definition, or the old school definition. Is it correct, or we need to look into it differently? Yeah. I will share some other numbers which can show here. If you can go to the next slide, Shekhar. So this is from IOGP, and that shows the fatalities. Yeah. So still, the industry sees an average of 5 fatalities from process safety incidents per year. That's roughly. Yeah. So that brings again the same question: is our understanding of the safety, is it the same, or things needs to be changed and we look at it differently? Yeah. That's what I can add, Shekhar, here. Yeah. That's another indicator of how fatalities are plateauing. Yeah.
Thanks. So as Kamil has said, I think we are used to measuring these things, and the data is there, but is it really telling us and is this the right thing to do? Which is where I think we need to start looking at, is there a possibility that with Industry 4.0, is there a possibility that we can reimagine what safety is? Do we need to go back to the same way of looking at safety as the absence of incidents and accidents or whatever it may be? Or can we look at safety as something else which is different from what we have? And I would make a case for saying that this is the time when we can start looking at safety differently from a perspective of Industry 4.0 and not look at it as the absence of incidents or accidents. And to be fair, I think half of you said it's not the absence of incidents, which is perfect, it's great. So it is the absence of incidents, or it's not the absence of incidents. So what is it then? It's about the presence of something, and I call it the presence of the 3 C's. The 3 C's being capacity, controls, and competency. And I'll dwell into each of these things in just a moment. Each of these things matter, and I think if we start looking at something as the presence of these things, which is safety as the presence of capacity, it would start making a lot more sense. Let's talk about capacity first. What do we really mean by capacity? We are talking about capacity as the ability to operate safely, or our ability to bounce back, or our ability to kind of be resilient, because that's exactly what we need, right? You need the system to be resilient, to be bouncing back and absorbing whatever shock it may be subjected to. So that's really the purpose of capacity. And this capacity can manifest in multiple forms. You can talk about financial capacity, or you can talk about the need for adequate resources, which would be man, material, machine, or methods. And all of these capacity things could also be in the form of maybe hard capacity or soft capacity. So you could be having hard factors like, I need this machine and this equipment and this material to do it. And I need to, if I'm changing the material, is there likelihood that something can go wrong? So there is capacity that's going to define, are we having the capacity to absorb the shock, and are we having the capacity to work safely? In some ways, if you look at this is really the factor of safety, so to say, because if you have that additional capacity to absorb the shock, it means that you're less likely to have something that goes wrong. So it is the ability to absorb the shocks. I had presented similarly in this context earlier in some other event, and somebody made a point to me saying that we shouldn't be looking at capacity merely from hard capacity. There could also be the aspects of an organizational culture, which could be a soft capacity. Absolutely, I think it does make sense. So we shouldn't be looking at capacity purely from a numerical standpoint of view. We are also talking about the softer aspects of, to what extent is this organization really having that culture that supports the performance of work, which respects people, which gives people the ability to kind of make mistakes and learn and continue to do. So we need to look at capacity in two contexts, which is hard and soft. The second C, which I want to talk about is, I would say, when you talk about 4.0, this is where a lot of it becomes very relevant, because we all know as safety professionals that it is all about controls. If I were to go risk management 101, it really starts with hazards, the existence of the hazards, which in turn results in a possible incident. And that incident could be leading to a consequence. The consequence could be a minor one, or it could be a major one. And there's a probability associated with this particular hazard being converted into an incident. And there is also a severity associated with the consequence of that. So this is really what I'm just oversimplifying this, obviously, but the way to mitigate risks is really not by doing the end of the line inspection, but the way to mitigate risks is really put in place the appropriate controls at all stages. You could put in a control to ensure that your hazards are minimized. You could put in a control to ensure that in the event that this hazard somehow manifests, it doesn't really lead to an incident. Or if you do have an incident, can we have a control in place such that the consequence is minimized? So this is really risk management 101, as we all know. So why is this relevant? It's relevant because when you talk about Industry 4.0, what Industry 4.0 offers is a wonderful opportunity for us to monitor the existence of controls and their effectiveness. This could be in the form of sensors. It could be in the form of devices which you're using to monitor. It could be in the form of monitoring of data. It could be in the form of actions that are being communicated to you in a proactive manner. So all of these can be easily monitored with Industry 4.0. So the presence of controls, when you have cyber physical systems, you can really talk about controls. It's not about going and doing an audit to find out whether somebody is in compliance, but it's really about finding out what kind of controls have you put in place, and are those controls effective based on the data that we're getting from the cyber physical system. So this is where there's a phenomenal opportunity for us to start looking at the presence of controls and move away this thinking all about, can we go and audit and find out what's going wrong? That's not the way. Can we go and look at the data and see whether it's effective? Can we look at the data which is coming out from these sensors to say that this control is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing? So that's really the presence of controls. So we need to make sure that, or rather we have an opportunity with Industry 4.0 to focus on the presence of controls rather than the absence of incidents. So I want to give you an example of a cyber physical system in operation so that you get an idea of what's happening here. I'm going to turn on the camera a moment. I'm going to put on a video. So just if you're having an audio problem, just make sure you can listen to this. Right. This is not, this is from a Microsoft event, but I'm going to just share some salient aspects of it. Just make sure you can hear the audio.
As our world becomes increasingly digitized, so does our ability to connect with it. Imagine if you could search your surroundings the same way you search the web. Using existing cameras and advances in AI, we can now find things and people in the real world in real time and take action to improve safety and well-being. When a dangerous spill occurs in a chemical plant, cameras recognize the incident. Information about the spill is instantly shared with the people who need it the most, enabling them to protect other employees from coming in contact with the hazard and clean it up. This technology can also help keep people safer in hospitals. Patients recovering from heart surgery are limited to how much they should exert themselves. When someone exceeds the prescribed level of activity, the nurse is alerted. What's more, the location of the closest wheelchair is identified so that the nurse can quickly get the patient seated and safe. This technology is also useful in an environment like a construction site, where people who need specialized tools are spread out, sometimes across multiple floors. Using cameras already in place, This technology can identify a specific tool, as well as the closest authorized person who can deliver it, saving everyone time and keeping the workflow moving. The digital and physical worlds are coming together to help make everyone more safe, secure, and productive. And we're bringing the edge of Microsoft's cloud to any device.
Right. So that's a classic example. If anybody needs the full video, I can send the link across to Nilesh and you can get it from him. But that's a classic example of the cyber and physical systems coming together. So you basically are in a position to do away with that monitoring, with that maybe physical monitoring and checking and all that stuff, and you're having the cyber physical system really doing that work. So that's probably the cyber physical systems in action to see whether the controls are in place and monitoring happening. So I want to talk about the next one, which I'm very passionate about, which is competency really. That's the third C. Because when we talk about safety, we obviously know there are many known and unknown hazards. These are just some of them. You could be having physical, psychosocial, mechanical, ergonomic, chemical, or biological hazards. But at the same time, we need to recognize that there are possibly hazards due to worker 4.0. I'm introducing this concept called worker 4.0 to represent worker in the fourth industrial revolution. So who's this worker 4.0 and what are the possible hazards that this worker's competency could probably come into play? Not just competency, but also the worker itself. Could there be some issues with which the worker is probably going to be a source of a hazard? So one is that recognize that we are all in a world which is very volatile. It's very volatile and there are changes happening every day. You know, people have obviously concerns with respect to what's happening to their family back home. You probably have a lot of gig workers, people who are temporary workers, remote workers. There's psychosocial pressure on all of these people, and they know that there's change happening every day. As simple as, you know, some people not knowing how do I operate my Zoom screen, how do I get on board and try and, you know, get started onto a call, how do I log into the system, or how do I operate this equipment remotely, given the fact that now I can't go to work. You know, so there are pressures that this worker has. And is there a possibility that this individual's competency comes in the way of actual performance of work? That's something to look into. Again, like I said, this is an area where I've been putting a lot of personal attention on. And I keep asking myself the question, are people having the ability to kind of deal with the situation? Do we as an organization have adequate risk competency to deal with the situation at all levels? Are the frontliners equipped enough to kind of deal with the situation? So these are questions that you have to ask yourself. And we've done something relatively, I would say, easy to do it. So I want to take a look at this thing where, you know, we have maybe a process safety. I'm using it as an example. We want to quantify risk competency. So here is this individual who's been asked to take a quiz. He's given this answer, but the minute he answers, he's got a little bit of a slider there which says, how sure are you about your answer? So as you can see, that answer says, and then he gets unsure. And then he says, okay, maybe I'm going to change my answer. And then I can put my ability to my answer is probably I'm 50-50. Similarly, he's got another answer, and this time he's very sure. And then he's talking about the calibration. Again, maybe he's going to be sure about this, and he's got an answer which he thinks is absolutely sure. Then there's a question on the wall. He's been asked a question relating to the work he's performing. And he gets this, again, he thinks he's got the right answer, and he's going to hit the submit button. Again, this is just an example. Don't take this seriously. It's just an example. When this happens, we have a little algorithm at the back end. This is our own Industry 4.0 technology. We have a little algorithm at the back end, which captures whatever this individual responded to and computes it in the form of an index. So there is a knowledge index, which is computed by an algorithm. In this case, let's take the knowledge index for the overview of PSN. And it shows that the knowledge index is 56. And there are some color codes there, as you can see, low risk, risky, lucky, risky, and high risk. How did we come up with this? We came up with this because we looked at, is this individual unconsciously ignorant, or is he consciously aware, or is unconsciously aware, or is he consciously ignorant? These are important questions to ask, because a person may say, I know, and give you a wrong answer. So this is the person who falls in the dread zone of an unconscious ignorance person. And if this person is going to be operating a piece of equipment, you're probably going to have challenges at work. So you really need to figure out, is this the right person that we want on the job? Or do we need to work with this person and, you know, enhance his competency so that we move him from the zone of unconscious ignorance to conscious awareness? Sometimes you could be plain lucky. You could say that I don't know, but I get it right. So that's your unconscious awareness, or in some cases, you're consciously ignorant about it. So this is a simple way in which you can also look at the risk competency of an individual and address this whole aspect of hazards beyond the physical hazards. We are also looking at competency as a hazard, because if this person doesn't get this right, the chances are that this person is going to cause some problems at work. The ideal situation would be a knowledge index of 100, where the individual is on a low risk thing and he knows that he's consciously aware of this. So that's about competency. I want to move on to the next one, which we talk about safety professional, because we talked about worker 4.0. Then let's talk about safety professional in the context of 4.0. And again, let me now transition back to Kamil. Kamil, I want to ask if you want to kind of talk about this briefly.
Yeah, just this slide actually is trying to support what Shaker or Jesse is trying to present to us, and how we are introducing the technologies and the human performance into it. And this is a chart which I'm sharing is from BP, and this is the way we look. So historically, we looked at the design, management system, or operating disciplines. Then we introduce self-verification, and you're checking now. Now we think this collaboration, standardization, increase the speed and quantity of learnings and standardization. Then about the human performance, this is where Shaker have mentioned it, and the technology. Yeah, you mentioned that the technology will help us to monitor. Yeah, rather than we just ask the HSE practitioners to walk around, do self-verification, and come back randomly. Now we have a better tools to monitor people and correct things. Yeah. So this is just support his idea, which you've mentioned. Yeah, thanks. If you move to the next slide. Yeah, here I just want to highlight, Shaker touched on 2 points are changing our reshaping our safety industries. Yeah, he touched about the technology and plus the theories which we are thinking about. So there are new thinking from our traditional safeties. So these, he touched on it. What I want to touch here is about the demographic change. What we are seeing globally, that the demographic is changing. Yeah. So we have more representative workforce. We see more females in the workplace. You can see it more in the Western worlds and also in South Asia. In Oman, if I'm just sharing with you the statistics of 2020, you can see 34% of our private sector are the females actually, and 46% of our public sectors are female workers. Yeah. Now, in Oman, female ratio in Omani population is almost 49%. And looking at how future goes, that you will see that increase of 34% of female in the industry. What that will change, what that is impacting us. Historically, HSE is male dominant, yeah, male dominant area. Majority of the designs have considered male bodies and how a man performs and how they look at it. Yeah? Now you have a female who's slightly different than the males. So are we as a safety practitioners looking into that? Yeah, we have a Generation Z, which is born 2000, yeah, and they're growing. Their expectations are different. Yeah, their way of learning is different. Yeah, they are digitized generation, which is different than what we are. Yeah? They have a skill of challenging and critical thinking, which is different than our way. They are more visual. Yeah. So all those bringing to the safety world now. Now we are the Malaysia earlier mentioned our HSE practitioner in Oman, and it's mainly dominated with the young people here. So our traditional paperwork industry, which we are developing, and we're having a procedures and processes and plan, are these people are really interested to read? Yeah. The research saying that their span is much more shorter than us, so their focus is less. You see the deal with videos and pictures and all that on daily basis, are really approaching them correctly in a way we are disseminating the learnings and teaching to them. Yeah? Now, we also see elderly. Yeah? So the technology and the health improvement made people live longer. Yeah. And if you go to Western Europe and US and all that areas, you see that the birth rate is also decreasing. So you see more elderly people working in the workplace. and they are more vulnerable. So the statistics says that 25% of fatalities in UK, they were from elderly, so they are more vulnerable. Our historical definition of vulnerability is about pregnant women, young people, yeah. So that if these people are coming to the work, how we are going to handle them, how we are going to teach. I remember during the pandemic in 2020, we looked at the elderly and people who have a special medical cases where we consider them as vulnerable, and we didn't allow them to go to the site. That was not historical thinking. So all that actually changing our industry. So beside the technology, beside the theories, there is a demographic change, which I just wanted to highlight here. Thanks, Shekhar. Back to you.
Thank you. I think you have one more slide to go, right?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that one. Yeah, just skip it.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, in which case, let me just go on and say that this is the most important thing. So what's going to change with Industry 4.0 and the safety professionals? What are some of the things that we think are going to be different when we go here? So I've got the left side is probably where we stand today, and the right side is where we probably need to be. So I'm going to talk about the first one is really from I've put it as the same alphabet. So it's from an enforcer. We're probably today as safety professionals see ourselves as this people who are policing and enforcing things. Not everybody, obviously, but most people tend to look at it that way. But we got to move from that to an explainer. In other words, it's not about, it's not about what they should be doing, but it's also about the why. So you got to move ahead and start explaining to people what is required and what needs to be done, because the enforcement, if your job is really enforcing, you're probably not required, because that enforcement can be better done by a cyber-physical system. But a cyber-physical system may not be able to explain it to the person on the job or wherever. So you need to start looking at yourself more as an explainer who can give the know why rather than an enforcer who's talking about the know what. Okay, so move from being an enforcer to being an explainer. So that's the first critical change that a safety professional needs to bring in. The second one is from being a generalist. I think most of us tend to be generalists. We know a little bit about physical security. We know a little bit about possibly biological, maybe a little more today on that. Maybe we know about occupational hygiene and other areas now. But we need to also start becoming a little more of a globalist. Why is that? That's because changes that are happening elsewhere in the world are probably going to impact you. Who knew 2 years ago, who knew that there was a little virus in some city called Wuhan, somewhere in China, which was going to kind of disrupt the whole world? Are we ready for it? Were we ready for it? Do we know where the next challenge is going to come from? Do we know what's going to happen to the maritime routes when there's a global warming happening? Are we aware what are some of the reporting requirements that corporates are going to have as part of the ESG, which is the environmental, social, and governance requirements? How does that impact a safety professional? So you've got to take this perspective away from talking purely about safety from a safety generalist perspective to one who's a little more globalist and able to look at the broader picture and see what else is happening in the world out there that we need to talk about and start seeing how it makes an impact on what we do on a day-to-day basis. In other words, that horizon scanning needs to happen where you need to be looking at a broader perspective. This is another one of my favorites. I think as professionals, we use these terms measurement and monitoring in an interchangeable manner. We look at measurement and monitoring as one real word, but I think there's a subtle difference which we need to pay attention to. Because when we talk about measurement, we traditionally measure what's already happened. So something's already happened, we measure it, and then we come back and say, this is what it is, and here's the report. Vis-a-vis monitoring, which says what is happening. And that becomes very critical, because in Industry 4.0, you're going to have the data pouring into you. And that data is something which you should be constantly monitoring to take those actions. It's not about measuring what happened in the past, but it's about monitoring what's happening now and trying to make sense out of that monitoring. So that's a critical role which we need to do, which means we need to start getting comfortable with looking at data. We need to start getting comfortable with numbers. Those are all things which matter, because if we are not monitoring and taking action as and when it happens, we're probably not doing our job, or probably we're not getting ready for Industry 4.0. So make that subtle shift from measurement to monitoring. The other one, the next one that you want to talk about is really about take the focus away from content to context. Again, I want to make this relevant from a perspective of we all know the standardized information that's probably available in the books and what you can share with people. That's all that's all standardized content. But I think when we start becoming an explainer and when we want to kind of communicate things to others, it's important to start looking not just at content, but we need to contextualize this to the work of that person. We need to contextualize it to the specific job this individual is doing. And we need to make them aware that this is the context. I also want to say that artificial intelligence can do everything. Artificial intelligence can tell you that this is what needs to happen. This is how it needs to be done, but artificial intelligence cannot contextualize. If I were to bring it down to a very down-to-earth example, it might find fault with a person who's kind of possibly not wearing or not, maybe he's having a behavioral issue, but it won't know that this person probably is a migrant labor from, let's say, the state of Kerala in India, and right now his house is probably flooded and his family is going through a problem. Those are contextual information which you as a human being can have, but what a machine may not have. So humans are good at contextualizing. Machines and artificial intelligence can never contextualize. And we need to start building that ability to contextualize. The biggest skill that you can have in the era of artificial intelligence is humanity. The more we become humans and the more we are able to contextualize, the more we will be successful in Industry 4.0. The next one I want to talk about is, again, we tend to look at ourselves as experts in what we do. I think that's the wrong way to look at it, because we can never be an expert in today's world. The minute you wake up in the morning tomorrow, something new has happened, something has changed. So what you can do is really continually build that expertise. But to ever consider yourself an expert on something is probably, I would say, an error in judgment. Because if we say we are an expert in something, it means we've reached the pinnacle of knowledge with that, but that's not necessarily going to be true in today's world, because change is happening so rapidly. And you'll have to constantly keep building that expertise, as opposed to saying that I'm an expert in so and so. So don't rest on your laurels. Continually build that expertise, have that philosophy of continual learning, and make that happen, because that's how you really build that expertise. So these are some of the changes that I think a safety professional should start looking at. It's E to E, enforcer to explainer, generalist to globalist, measurement to monitoring, content to context, and expert to expertise. So keep this in mind as you start looking at dealing with Industry 4.0. And I'm saying that the balance will now start shifting towards the right as we enter this 4.0 era. So as safety professionals, I think it's always, you recognize that most of the time you're juggling with multiple priorities, you're dealing with security issues, safety issues, like ergonomic issues, maybe biological issues. It's very easy to think that we are really the jack of all. But then what are those specific skills that you need? What's that one skill you as a safety professional thinks needs to have? Again, I want to open up a poll here. So I'm going to quickly transition. I'm going to ask you this question. What would you consider as one of the most important skills for an HSE professional? Maybe you can use a couple of words, not necessarily a single word. Again, please go back to slido.com, key in that thing, or use your QR code and scan that. Oh no, you're supposed to say what skill you're looking for. 17401 is just the code. So please enter what you think is the most important skill, unless you meant that numerical skills. Okay, adaptability, great. Communication. Okay, curiosity, I like that. Okay, communications probably got a extra one. Okay. Come on, we can do better than this. We need more people. Yeah, communication standing out. Humanity, that's great. Resilience, wonderful. Hunger for learning, adaptability, great points. Very good. Again, I'm looking for at least 20 respondents. We're still at 14. Okay, let's get a few more in, please. Okay, a lot of you think it's communication, commitment, competency, curiosity, adaptability. Sounds good. Observation skills, leadership skills, great. I agree. All of these are absolutely important skills for an IOSH professional to have. Competency is certainly important. But I want to give you my take on this. So my personal take on this is that if it's that one skill that you look for, my take on this is that somebody already mentioned this. You've got to obviously be curious. You've got to get back to becoming as curious as a child. And it's about being curious. And very importantly, I would say it's about the connecting the dots. I think this connecting the dots is very important because you've got to start making sense of those so-called maybe patterns that you don't necessarily understand today, but can you look at that cause and effect and connect them back and say that how is this particular activity that's happening in location A going to impact location B? And what is this new development that's happened in Canada? How is that going to impact me out here? Or what is the impact of a particular activity which is being done in location A? How is that going to impact this individual who's working in factory B? So these are all patterns that you need to start looking at and start forming those patterns. So to me, all the skills that you mentioned there are extremely important. Communication, competency, whatever, they're all extremely important. But I would say the single most important skill that we need to develop is to look at data, connect the dots, trying to make sense of that so-called disparate data that's existing in silos, but trying to make sense of it, building those patterns and trying to get there and having some patterns out of it. So I'd put it differently and also say that you should be able to deep dive into the specific issues, but you also need to be starting to look back at the big picture by connecting the dots and saying, can I form this big picture and see what's happening? So to me, I'm not disagreeing with any other points you made, but I believe that connecting dots is possibly the biggest skill that you need to have. With that, I am done with what I wanted to present. I want to just summarize it by putting 3 takeaways. First is that Industry 4.0 now is here and now, and this is going to change the world of work. We have an opportunity now that we have it, that we have these controls, now that we have the cyber-physical system, we have an opportunity to start looking at safety differently and can we look at safety as the presence of something which is capacity controls and competency rather than the absence of an incident or an accident, and Industry 4.0 gives us that opportunity. Somebody used the word adaptability. Yeah, absolutely right. A safety professional needs to be continuously building adaptability and building expertise and adapting to Industry 4.0 because this is a happening thing now, and it's something which is going to be an ongoing basis, which is happening on an ongoing basis. So that is what I have for you. I'm very happy to connect with anybody who's interested. That would take you to my LinkedIn profile. Otherwise, you can reach out to me at any point of time through my email ID as well. With that, I'm going to stop and hand this over to Nilesh. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Kamil, I'm sure you'd be happy to take the questions as well.
Thanks.
So I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Jesse. Great presentation. I'm just looking on the chat box if any questions are there. So before the questions, any questions comes, a couple of questions. Like you talk about the industry, 4.0, but how this transformation from the existing, industry 3.0, industry 2.0, this where you see this industry 4.0 is going, and how far, especially the traditional industries like construction, is going to cope up with these, advanced technological advancements and the other challenges.
Yeah, it'll obviously be driven by the larger organizations. So the larger organizations are going to be driving this forward to the next level, and it will be the BPs of the world and the shells of the world who will be possibly driving this. And I don't think this transition has not happened. It's already happening. I mean, Industry 4.0 has been around actually for the last 15 odd years. But what's going to happen in the next few years is we are being forced into certain activities such as long-term move to the remote work and all of these things. So you are moving into this, you're being forcibly moved to some of these things. And the other thing that's going to probably change a lot of things is 5G and quantum computing. These are two technologies which are going to have a big impact, because with these two technologies in particular, you're going to have a lot of low latency. So you can possibly monitor an oil refinery from your home because the connectivity is kind of taken for granted, so you don't necessarily need to do. So you are going to be having a situation where it is not going to be easy for the second tier and the third tier companies to get on board immediately. But I think What you'll also see parallelly is the simplicity of the technology. Maybe today's technologies are probably a little more complex, a little more expensive, and possibly affordable only by the large organizations. But take things like wearables. Wearables have become extremely affordable, right? So it would proliferate from maybe small, low-value items, but then eventually it will move on to the high-value items. And it is the cost of computing which will come down enormously and make these technologies more affordable for the small industries. Is it going to be 5 years? Is it going to be 10 years? I don't know. I mean, it's really depends on how fast the technology can move and how fast the cost of computing comes down. But I do think it's fair to expect that in the next few years, a lot of these activities will kind of ramp up.
Thank you, Jesse. Now, with respect to the extreme changes what has happened around the industry, especially because of the pandemic, the way of thinking, the way of working, the remote working, work from home, and other issues, and all these advancements. So the next question is, what are the avenues for safety professionals to improve their competencies to cater the industry 4.0 and cope up with all these changes happening around?
Again, this is just my take, but I think the most important thing that a safety professional should do today is to start getting comfortable with data. I think if you want to, you should be doing some course on data analytics, try to figure out how do we kind of get the data from disparate sources, start connecting them together and start looking at how can I monitor this data in a proactive manner and get information out of it. So data science will probably be a critical area for professionals to kind of develop themselves in, because when you are digitally savvy and competent with handling of data, and you have that functional expertise, which is also the people sensitivity and your ability to deal with people. So the combination of people management and data science and functional expertise in safety is a deadly combination. I think there are not too many people who can have that. So I think it is a great time for safety professionals in that sense. But having said that, if you go back to the old school and say that my job is to police and my job is to enforce something and my job is to really look at the data, look at reports and then take actions, you're still getting into that proactive mode of looking at historical data as opposed to being proactive and looking at monitoring data, which is giving you that so-called proactive actions.
Yeah, Jesse, you rightly said, the historical way of, the working for the health and safety professionals is doing the measuring, not the, monitoring. So, people talk about more on the reactive indicators. They measure the performance in terms of LTIF or the, reactive indicators. So, definitely there is a requirement of shift change in terms of health and safety professionals, whether you talk about the explainer or being a globalist, or becoming a monitoring, or looking to the context to the things, changing from expert to the expertise. But the other challenge is when you talk about the cyber-physical system, and whether it is going to replace the half of the health and safety professionals' physical requirement, or in other way the challenge to the need of health and safety professionals.
I think as long as health and safety professionals become more human, you can never be replaced. So I think the ability of health and safety professionals to become more human is going to be critical. If you again are going to be looking yourself, actually, I'm sorry, I'm bringing on the point again, but if you're looking at yourself as purely being an enforcer of something, that can be done by technology. You will be replaced for sure. Okay, there's no doubt about it. But if on the other hand, you're able to contextualize and you're able to go back and have that, ability to go back and say, why is this guy doing this? Is it because he had a fatality in his family some years ago? Or is it because he's going through a psychosocial issue? A machine may not be able to find that out already. A machine can go and you can put a camera there and see, is this guy wearing a seatbelt or a harness or whatever, but you can't find out, is this guy really having an issue that he needs to deal with, which I need to talk to him, because that's not something a machine can do. So I think your ability to become a human is going to determine whether you're going to be successful. Your ability to look at data is going to determine whether you're going to be successful.
The next question from from Raja is, there are few observations in the few conservative in the industries who doesn't want to adopt with the new HSE technologies, preemptive HSE systems. So they want to still in the in the olden way of health and safety. So however, the new generation competent will support HSE innovative technologies, artificial intelligence with the BBS in minded way. So what's your talk on, call on that?
I mean, I think it's more of a comment, and I agree. Personally, I'm I'm not a big fan of BBS, so let's not get into that. That's a different discussion we can have, because I think it's really all about competency. I don't think anybody really, unless they have a specific problem in mind, will come to kind of create I mean, nobody wants to get hurt, but it's just that probably they don't know the consequence of not wearing a specific activity. So I think it's all about education and competency. That's where I would put my focus on. I would say that if you have a competent person who knows that he doesn't know, he is likely to be kind of doing the right thing. So I completely agree that there are a few conservatives, and that's because I think the writing is on the wall, but people haven't seen it. That's the only thing. So I think it's about we educating people that this is what is happening, and this is what is happening, and this is where the things are going. So I think forums like this and networking and talking to people and understanding what's happening in other industries and seeing what is happening in a proactive manner in certain industries, bringing them over to your organization. I think these are all activities that we need to get more involved in. And this is where IOSH is a great platform, right? So IOSH is a great platform to bring together professionals to kind of talk about these things, learn about them, and bring those good practices back to your industry. So it's, again, like I said, you got to be an explainer, because if you can go and explain to your management why specific thing needs to be done, your management will buy it. I mean, there is this notion that, you know, the management or the business doesn't support safety. I think the business probably doesn't support safety because we don't make an effort to understand the why behind it and explain the why behind it. So long as we understand the why and explain the why, you will have support. That's my take.
No, absolutely correct, Jesse. You know, you talk about, you know, when we talk in the boardrooms, if you talk about the reactive things, the boardroom will always take the health and safety professionals as an overhead to the organization. But if you talk, you know, convert that investment in HSE as a profitability of the organization, definitely boardroom will start hearing on that. The next question is about in HSE itself, there are incompetent personnels still ruling the industry with major oil and gas player. Support that need to be changed that with the stringent competency selection process?
I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but I'll let Kamil answer that because he's the expert from the oil and gas industry.
Sorry, Nalesh, can you come back to it?
The question is that the health and safety is being governed by the incompetent people, those who, you know, is still ruling the industry, especially in the oil and gas, and whether there is a need to change with the stringent competency selection process.
Yeah, I mean, there will be always people with the old views, and it would require some time to change people, convince them. So it's not an overnight something. And different countries will be in different levels. We in Oman, we are new to things, I would imagine. And also we need to be careful also because not all the industries are at the same level. Or for example, you will have in Oman, I'm just giving you a specific Oman, oil and gas is very HSE cautious, and they spend a lot of money and they put resources and all that to manage. It's a high risk industry. While if you go to our manufacturing industry, you will see very little safety precautions and all that. So whatever you want to apply here, you cannot apply. You need to get the basic rights there also. Doesn't mean that you cannot bring the technology and jump things, yeah? But you need to enforce some compliance at the basic level. So saying that, yes, there is people will be pushed back, but that's normal, yeah? And we need to take it as is, explain things, describe things and how things are happening, and that will help us. Yeah? Hope I answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely, Kamil. You know, we have to bring the logical thinking in the profession. So rather than, you know, just taking, definitely complacency or the, you know, the old incompetent people in the industry, but with the thought process and with the, you know, logical thinking, as JC told, that, you know, we have to reimagine the safety. So basically, rather than the traditional way of, you know, doing the risk assessment, we need to talk about the capacity, control, and competence. So Jesse, do you want to add with that, you know, taking out the complacency from the, you know, profession or from the industry?
I think that's a given, isn't it? That's a given because obviously I think it's common sense that we need to do it. I just like the 3 C's because it gives you a kind of a model to go with. So maybe in some other forum, I'll talk about the next one, which I have something called the 3C, 3P model, which I've come up with. 3P talks about what does it take to kind of actually make a system resilient. So there's the 3P that I have to go with the 3Cs, but I will talk about that in a separate forum.
Great. But you added one more C, JC, that is curious. So the future health and safety professionals, they need to be curious.
Yeah, it goes back to saying that you need to kind of not take information as it comes. You need to be able to analyze that information and understand why is it happening and what is the impact of that information. So that curiosity factor to ask the why and why, that why, keep asking that why, because if you can't ask that why and if you don't know what that why is, you can't explain to others, because like I said, you have to explain, and for that you have to have the know why. So, and you won't have the know why if you don't ask, if you don't stay curious.
Great. The next question is from Alok. He talks about while the industry 4.0 is advancing very fast, do you think if cybersecurity is being perceived as a tangible risk by industry at large?
Absolutely.
What is its penetration into the boardroom discussion?
Okay. I wouldn't know if it's, I know it is in the boardroom, but I can't be, I'm not privy to boardroom discussions, but I do know that this is a big deal. It is absolutely under consideration, and it's a moving target, right? It's a moving target because, you can find out what it is. You can have, you can think you're completely protected, but then there's a vulnerability that's, exposed itself, and then it suddenly happens. You don't even know about it for a very long time. So this is an ongoing threat. And I think there are some interesting episodes where how cybersecurity can essentially bring down an entire oil refinery. Now you know that. So there are issues. It is definitely an activity which is of serious issue. And I face this possibly as a vendor to organizations. I face this as a problem because I deal with a technology product, but I can't get into many of the oil companies because they wouldn't have a cloud solution, because it's a problem from their perspective. So it's not easy to get into the cloud, to sell technology solutions today. So you have to be really, really going through those penetration tests and other protocols before oil and gas industry will accept you there as a technology provider. So there is definitely focus. There's definitely a lot of energy behind it. And maybe Kamal can add to it.
Kamal, any thoughts from you?
Nothing specific, Nalesh, on that. Yeah, nothing.
Great. So, we had a great discussion, and, I think we can move, discuss, continue, but we have a time limitation. So, if we want to be a, successful health and safety professional, if we want to, align ourselves with the fast pace of the industry 4.0, as JC and Kamil told, that we need to be curious, we need to become more human, working with the challenges of technology as well as the industrial challenges. So with this, thank you, Jesse and Kamil, for joining us.
Thank you, everybody, for having us.
As IOSH Oman. Sorry, Jesse. Yeah, please.
No, it's fine. I said thank you for inviting me, and thanks for the engaging discussions.
Just be there, Jesse, for next couple of minutes. So okay, sure. We at IOSH Oman, we have every third Wednesday the similar branch events. So if you want to join our new future events, you can block your calendar every third Wednesday between 7:30 to 9 p.m. Oman time. We have these events. We have a different platforms where we used to do the presentation, CPT, IPT sessions. We have a panel discussions. We also have the coffee talks, and we have a Middle East conference coming next month, and we also do the participation in the local events and the conferences. So our future events as IOSH Oman, we have a next branch meeting on the 3rd Wednesday of November, which is 17th of November. We have a Middle East conference on 2nd and 3rd November, where we are going to discuss about profession emerging from the pandemic. This will be 2 days, 2 half-day session. We also have coming, Global HSE Forum in February from 13 to 16. So this is the Middle East Conference 2021, which we are organizing jointly with the IOSH UAE branch, Qatar branch, and IOSH Oman. We'll have a great presentation for 2 days where we'll be talking about HSE competency framework. We'll be talking about the panel discussion on the pandemic changes to the organizational approach, enhancing HSE culture using technology for sustainable future. We'll be also having the principles of human and organizational performance. and shaping the future of occupational health and safety in Middle East. And we will have a great panel discussion on women in safety, a force of change, a force for change. So please block your calendars. So with this, let me thank you, JC, for joining today. I know this is very late night in Singapore, but still you accepted our invitation. So thank you for joining us. And as a token of thanks, we'll be sending you this certificate. And please do support as usual, to IOSH Oman Branch initiative. Also, thanks to Kamil for the great support and the insightful view from the Oman perspective and the regional perspective. So thank you, Kamil, for joining today and giving your insight. We'll be sending you the certificates to you. As IOSH Oman, we support the members to use the IOSH Blueprint framework for enhancing their competence. So we encourage members to use this competency framework for their own development, or even they can adopt in their industry, in their organization for the competency framework for their employees. I also encourage you to join the IOSH mentoring system. You can be a mentor or you can join as a mentee, and you can get benefit of this. We, as IOSH Oman Branch, we support the members in terms of all the aspects. Whether you need you need the support to enhance your CPD, IPDs for your professional development. Any issues with the membership or any coordination required with the IOSH UK, our membership team is ready to support you. For this, we have a different subcommittees in the branch, where we have a committee for the speaker and presentation, member support, CPD, IPD committee. So you can reach out to our, any of these committee members, and they'll be very eager to support you. Although the pandemic is going down, the trends are looking good, but still, even if you are vaccinated, please ensure that you follow all the protocols. Your safety is very important. Still, even after the vaccination, follow all the safety measures and keep yourself healthy, safe, and your family safe. So with this, thank you everyone for joining. JC, if you can just confirm, can we share the presentation later with the attendees? Because some of the attendees, they wanted, whether this presentation can be shared.
Yeah, I need to probably clean up some of the images which may be copyrighted, but other than that, I can share them.
Great.
Not a problem.
Anyway, today's session was also, video recorded, and the video recording will be later available on the IOSH Oman Branch webpage. So you can make use of that. So with this, thank you everyone for joining. I know people across the world, from Caribbean, from Singapore, from Hong Kong, from other parts of the world, Kuwait, UAE, people are here. So special thanks to the Singapore people, because it is a very late night and you made a call. I know the JC put a lot of efforts to bring you all guys here. So thank you once again, and keep supporting our initiative for a better profession in future. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you, everybody.